Hello and welcome to the latest from Hearts Standard. My name is Joel Sked and I'm joined on this occasion by Craig Cairns. How's it going, Craig?
I'm doing very well, Joel. How is it going with you? I don't know why I said it in such a staccato way. Sorry.
Yeah, it is. It's going not too bad at all. We are here to discuss a few topics. We are going to start by having a wee look at the article you wrote yesterday, Craig, and I think there's some interesting concepts from it that's worth discussing. Like in the headline, are Hearts really trying to replicate Leicester City? We will explore that. We'll talk a wee bit about the Jamestown recruitment process. That's something that I put out today. And of course, Daniel Oyegoke, who has moved from Heart of Midlothian to Hellas Verona for a six-figure fee and plus add-ons. That was announced earlier today as well. So he becomes the fifth player to exit Hearts. But we'll first start with your piece from yesterday. Following the 3-2 win over Kilmarnock on Saturday, you looked at just going by what Critchley said about James Wilson and just with the setup and the potential for how it could look with Xander Khartoum. What you kind of compared it to 2015, 2016 Leicester City, of course, who won the Premier League. I'll pop up the graphic just now, but basically talk us through, Craig.
Aye, so there's similarities. I have to say there's lots of differences, which I didn't. I think the section that I put in the article, I could have just made that an article within itself.
Yeah.
But I had to cut it off. One of the obvious differences is Hearts are expected to take the game to teams a lot more than I think Leicester probably did. So I think Leicester definitely had much more of a focus on defence. I'm also not saying that he's definitely aping it here. There could be some influences. It could be coincidence. It could be like somewhere between the two. I'm not entirely sure. But it is quite striking how many similarities there were. Like you say, the jumping off point was him saying Vardy, because in fact, it might have been a couple of months ago now, he said that they had been showing clips to James Wilson of certain players that they wanted him to replicate. And it was understood that it was like non-Hearts players that they were talking about. That was maybe like other leagues and things like that. And he's mentioned Vardy the other day. And you see some of the runs he made against, mostly into that sort of left channel half space as well. Very sort of reminiscent of what Jamie Vardy does. He doesn't have the pace of Jamie Vardy, so you can see that the two chances where he does get the ball down there, one of them eventually leads to the opening goal. He cuts back in. He's got the kind of intelligence to cut back in. I think Vardy would maybe be more likely to get to the ball well before the defender and cut in or get to the touchline or whatever it is. So there's going to be clear differences there as well with the player. But another interesting thing to sort of add to that, I don't know if you remember him talking about, I think it might have been his PE project that he was handing in the day after he scored at Easter Road. And it was about, I don't know if that was that assessment or whether it's something else he's been working on, but he's been working on pace and improving pace, and he's been looking into and studying that as part of his PE assessment, which is quite interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. And I kind of, whether we're just adding 2 + 2 + 2 and getting 6 when the real answer's not 6, and just piecing it all together, but it kind of does all add up. And I suppose I can't see James Wilson tanning a couple of cans of Red Bull during the
and a wee pack of snus under his lip.
maybe he strikes me more as like a Tenzing energy drink where it's a bit more natural and
ginger shot.
Yeah, but yeah, it's definitely really interesting that Critchley said that about James Wilson, and he's always talked about him wanting him to kind of stretch the game. And it was interesting as well that both him and Elton Kabangu, you just look at them and think maybe not the most natural partnership because they both, I think you talked about this in the article and seen you have a conversation with someone on Twitter today, that they can both make similar runs, but in certain games, and I think I talked about it with Laurie on Saturday, there's going to be certain games where both of them as a strike partnership are really useful with all that energy and all that pace.
Yeah, and if they're doing the same things, that can work against certain teams like it did against Kilmarnock, as long as they're not always doing the same thing at the same time. Obviously, that would be, you don't want them to be like stepping on each other's toes. But yeah, we see that Critchley likes to tweak things and have bespoke game plans for certain teams. So I think we will see this for certain games. And then there's other games where you will see something more like a Shankland or something like that come in, somebody who's going to drop off a bit more, or maybe even play he's not averse to playing a 4-2-3-1. We've seen as well. And like, that's another thing we should say, that Critchley's not stuck to one shape. This is the one shape that he's kind of gone back to most. It's what he started with, and it's what he's gone back to most. And one thing I'll just briefly brush over is the Fuchs and Albrighton partnership looks remarkably similar to the Penrice Spittle one. And the Khartoum one, I'm not saying that Hearts have signed somebody or are going to look to sign somebody like Rian Mahrez, but I think the idea looks quite similar.
Yeah.
And that's why it looks like that's why Hearts have been in the market for left-footed attackers, is because he wants somebody cutting in on that side. And that would kind of make sense. Yeah,
exactly. I think so. If you can see on the graphic on the screen, the possible Hearts lineup, you put Khartoum in there. He can play different midfield roles, but naturally, if the window closed tomorrow, you would see that Khartoum fits into that right hand side and provides. Again, you've seen it with Critchley, or read it with Critchley's comments. Khartoum, he provides balance, a left-footed balance, and someone who will look to play through balls, who will look to be creative, and then also be a goal-scoring threat as well. Well, he's not got the trickery or maybe the pace that Mahrez does, but there's kind of similarities in terms of being that productive figure. And then you've got Taylor as someone who I think will be the first choice right back between now and the end of the season, with Forrester more of a deputy role, and it'll be interesting, going to be intriguing to see how the Costa Rican does. But yeah, there's similarities there. And then even in the midfield, where you've got Kante, and
Devlin's turned into him this season.
A long time ago when he signed for him, I remember I was working the Even News at the time, and I watched a fair bit of Cammy Devlin on Y Scout, and I was blown away. I was like, my God, we're signing a really, really good player here. And in the article, I did make N'Golo Kante comparisons, and
now it's finally come full circle.
3 years later. But you look at that and the balance, where if you're going to play a 4-4-2, the way that's set up there, you need legs in midfield, and you look at the potential for Callum Newhoff to come back into that, and then you've got a couple of guys in the midfield who are a lot of there's a lot of energy there, and like Newhoff, again, it's going to take him time to. Hearts are being really careful with him, but he played in a bounce game the other week, and having spoken to a few people, there was a lot of suggestions that he impressed in that game as well. So which is really encouraging. And then the two centre backs as well. You shared a video on YouTube about Leicester's tactics, and when they're talking about Huth and Morgan, I was thinking, they sound exactly like Halkett and McCart.
I know,
They're just the ability to head everything, and maybe not
the quickest, but yeah,
quickest, yeah.
What was the word? Monumental heading ability or something. The guy said, yeah, he used a really grand word to talk about the heading ability, and yes, I thought the same. It's like that's what Critchley's trying to do here. And when I was first putting it together, I have to admit that I was thinking Benny when I was thinking Kante, but then it clicked with me like a few seconds later. I was like, no, Devlin's the guy playing like Kante this season. Not that I'm saying he's anywhere near that level. I'm just saying like in a sort of Scottish Premiership, but relative to the Scottish Premiership.
Yeah, and again, you mentioned at the start where I think the big difference is the fact that Hearts, there's an onus on Hearts to dominate games and attack, and I think Neil Critchley wants Hearts to have more control rather than just simply being a counter-attacking team.
Aye, definitely. And that's where somebody like Khartoum may fit into that kind of thing a bit better than, not than a Mahrez, but you know what I mean. Again, the sort of Scottish Premiership equivalent of a Mahrez, where the game would be a bit more about counter-attacking and being like devastating in those spaces that are created. So, aye.
Yeah, and I suppose that's just on that. It's probably worth bringing in a few of the comments or questions on YouTube or Facebook that have been coming in. And the one thing is, like we're talking about that the control, and it makes there's probably less if you've got loads of control and you've got a Cabangu and Wilson up front and the two wing backs. There's less of a need for maybe pace as there was going back a few months, but because Alan Cowan says we need proper pace out wide before the end of the window. I do think that pace in those areas would be welcome, and it just provides a different a different quality, or because there's certain games where you will need pace on the wide areas, and there's certain games where you could do with that pace coming off the bench.
Aye. There's definitely going to be games where, like, exactly what you described. There's going to be some games where you want to start, but there's going to be games like at Ibrox and Celtic Park where you want to counter attack more, and then, as you say, you're going to want options off the bench and things like that, and pace out wide, and not even just pace out wide, pace and quality out wide is what Hearts have kind of lacked, because they've tried a few different things to varying degrees, and I wouldn't say they're all slow. All the players that have played out wide, but they've not had the sustained quality that's been required.
And before I move on to kind of talk about Oyegoke in the window as a whole, I will just answer some questions. Drew, so Alan Cowan says, are we really looking at Danny Armstrong? Danny Armstrong is a player that's interesting Hearts, and they've had an eye on. Drew Cowan says, do you think Armstrong will sign for us? That's a whole different question. And I suppose if the two parties can agree, and again, it depends on money, depends on interest from elsewhere, because with what Armstrong's done at Kelly, there is going to be interest from both sides of the border. So I can't give you a definitive answer on that one. I'm sorry. HMFC PTB ask, any truth rumour about Maumir Tankovic? No, but I don't believe he is a target for Hearts. Sorry?
Can I bring one up?
Yes, of course.
Gorgaloy's podcast asking, where does Steinvender fit in that defence? Will we chopping and changing? I think we need stability defensively. Well, I think, first of all, as Critchley said, it's going to take a wee while for him to get fully up to speed, so I don't think there's going to be any rush to get him into the team. Secondly, he may be needed, as we've seen very recently with Halkett. He's got that in him. We're going to have a backup for when Halkett's not available. So I imagine that we might see him sooner rather than later. And yes, it might be a wee bit chopping and changing at first, rather than him coming in and being a starter right away. But there may be a point where Halkett's ruled out for a period, and or McCart for that matter. I mean, he's not going to be infallible, and he may be needed sooner.
I think so. Steinvender, I think both him and Khartoum are going under
a sort of pre-season.
Yeah, small pre-season. I think the plan was, it was going to do that for a couple of weeks. I don't know if that will need to be expedited because of Halkett. So the good thing is, for example, if Halkett was fully fit, just the way that the team have been performing now, and the way that McCart and Cabangu have started, that there's not as much pressure on the two new guys to come in. That pressure increases on Steinvender if turns out that Halkett is out for a prolonged period. I don't think he will be. That's just that's a hunch without knowing anything concrete. But I wouldn't certainly wouldn't take that to the bank. So it will be
also just as also seen in the past that they don't risk Halkett as well. There's sometimes, like for instance, the weekend there. I mean, he looked like he walked off the pitch and he maybe could have given it another 5 minutes or something like that. And we saw, was it Copenhagen? That was like quite early in his return, and he had come back with a knock. So the point is that they don't risk him either. So sometimes he's injured, but sometimes they don't risk him and don't overdo it with him as well. So yeah, we may see Steinvender sooner rather than later.
There's just two more before we move on to Oyegoke. Fraser M asks, is Mackay going? If there is an opportunity for him to exit and and Hearts are fine with it, he'll depart. But again, it's said a few times on this, moving players on is tricky in January because you need factors that the deal suits Hearts.
Mm-hmm. There's
interest from other clubs, and the player wants to go to that club. So yeah, that'll be we'll see. And there's this one from Handsome Flacco Jodoy. Are we looking at Anderlecht striker Haywood Jablomi? I need to double it. I need to see if this is actually a real person.
It's like you're getting Bart Simpson.
Yeah. Haywood Jablomi. Okay. I see what's happened here. I've just read that in my head. Oh dear, I've been stitched up. Up big time.
Looked like
Why did I read it out? I should have googled it first. Anyway, Daniel Oyegoke, Craig. What did you make of his? What did you make of? Were you surprised when the news emerged over the weekend? And what do you make of his exit?
Yeah, it was surprising. It was slightly. The timing was. What's the word I'm looking for? Like nobody's fault or anything, but it was just a bit difficult for Hearts. The timing, especially with the way the game transpired and Halkett going off, because you could see that Nielsen was a bit more uncomfortable than perhaps Oyegoke would have been. We've seen Oyegoke be in the centre half position and do pretty well, actually. I mean, he was at centre half. He was part of the defence that kept a clean sheet up until the disaster at Ross County, for instance. So there has been games where he's performed well at right-sided centre-back. So he was missed at the weekend, and I think it was maybe one of the reasons. I'm not trying to have a go at Lewis Nielsen here. It's just difficult to get chucked in when you've not really played and you've not had a chance to, not even trained with the team that much and that kind of thing. But I don't think the game would have been as tight if Hearts had been able to bring on Oyegoke, or I'd maybe suggest that there's a good chance that it wouldn't have been as tight if Oyegoke had come on instead of Nielsen. So yeah, the timing was a little bit difficult, but everything else about it's just great for the club. I mean, I suppose the best thing about it is that he didn't become a superstar, and it's not like, it doesn't feel like Hearts are losing much. And I mean that with the best will in the world, because I quite like the guy and I was excited to see how he developed. He's younger than Musa, for instance. I think people maybe forgot how young a player he is. But the fact was that he had a difficult start, and then he was kind of rotated with Adam Forrester, and I think he kind of emerged as the better out of the two as Adam Forrester in recent times. But I think it still doesn't feel like he's a huge miss, if you see what I mean, especially with Taylor coming back. If Taylor can regain some of the good stuff that he did earlier in the season, then the feeling won't be missed. He won't be missed quite as much. Sorry, that was a bit of a ramble. And you were smirking the points. Are you still getting over your prank?
Yeah, I'm struggling not to laugh. It's very good. I do like a prank. I'm just but no, I did while trying to stifle the laugh. It was listening to it, and yeah, I agree. I think, when you're speaking, the best comparison is, there's not the best comparison. Maybe a similar comparison is Liam Boyce. Everyone kind of accepts like there was probably time to move on, but it just, again, it was a timing of him moving on, and then just with the Halkett injury was difficult. But yeah, you do forget that it's a good point about his age, and I still don't think we saw him in his best position for Hearts. I think his best position is right off a back three. However, when you look at it, I just don't think there's going to be a long-term place for him in the first team, because I don't see Hearts playing a back three. Certainly the suggestions are that's not going to be the case. And then you're looking at him as going to be a backup right back, or he is, if everyone's fit, you've got Kent, Halkett and Steinvender who are ahead of him as a right-sided centre-back. So yeah, as Critchley said in his comment on the Hearts website, that it's a deal that kind of makes sense for all parties involved. And then you add in, I suppose this is a nice segue into the Jamestown chat, is that Jamestown, one of their things is, yes, most people are interested in the recruitment side of things, but one thing they do is they've done a squad assessment before they came in, and they're continually to do a squad assessment and a squad analysis. And then they look at players, and there'll be players within the Hearts squad that are deemed as being more worthwhile than others of being moved on. And for example, because where he fits, I'm not sure there's like I said, with his position where it suits him, and then there'll be a few other players in that category.
I hadn't thought about that, about there not being a position for him long term, which I actually quite agree with. But even besides that, I've seen a wee bit of debate about whether it is or isn't Jamestown analytics, and it's clearly going to be. I think the sale is going to be influenced by it, and like you say, the squad will have been assessed, so they will have their valuations and their prices and where they see players fitting in short term and long term and all this kind of thing. But I think that what we can take away from it, I think I said a few weeks ago when we were talking about Devlin, I said this isn't a good example of it, but I think if somebody was to come in for Devlin and take him, that's the kind of thing we're probably going to have to get used to. And again, I know it was a different example because there was chat about the minimum fee release clause and all that kind of stuff. But if Hearts are going to implement this model properly, then we're going to have to get used to, and it's worse in January than it is in the summer, used to successful players being snatched away. Clubs meeting their valuation, and that's the model. We just have to let them go. Whereas in the past, and it might have even happened with this Oyegoke one, I don't know. In the past, given Hearts' league position and how precarious that is, and they're wanting, even if they move away from relegation between now and the end of the season, they still want to maximise as much as they can get between now and the end of the season, as high up the table and all that kind of stuff. The temptation might have been in the past to think, well, the short-term thing, the good thing to do is to keep Oyegoke because he will get us more points we will get more points with him between now and the end of the season than we will without him. Or we're gambling on that anyway. But the sensible thing to do in this model is to sell when you get peak valuation, or what you think your peak valuation is. And if this is the figures that are being discussed and there's a sell-on clause, then it's a great bit of business for somebody that Hearts picked up for nothing in the summer.
Picked up for a small six-figure fee.
Oh, right enough. The cross-border fee. Right. Yeah, sorry.
But yeah, just on the good thing is that I think one thing, flipping it to the signing side of things and the potential of sales, is that I think like the focus of this, people will talk about player trading or player trading model, terms that maybe suck the fun out of football a wee bit. But the overarching thing is it's
player trading model is definitely one of these terms that's like trying to make it sound more fancy than it is, which has happened in the world of data and tactics and all that kind of stuff. But you're just talking about transfers. You're just talking about ins and outs, player trading models. Exactly. I say it as well, by the way. I'm not having a go. No,
absolutely. But I think there could be an assumption that because look at Khartoum, 29, look at Jamie McCarthy was 27, that I think a few eyebrows were being raised that, they don't seem like a Jamestown signing or a profile of a Jamestown player, when in fact that all players have to be approved by the Jamestown data, and they're just looking for the best players available for Hearts to improve Hearts. And I think that's the big thing, is the ultimate aim is for Hearts to be successful on the pitch, and then players being sold for profits is a byproduct of that success. So when you're successful on the pitch, then getting into Europe is another big one, because I think that's where a lot of players get a lot of notice. And then having that success, playing in those arenas and doing well will then lead to teams being interested in those players and you being able to sell players on for profit, and then it gets reinvested, and then you look to bring in better players, and it's just like it's a cycle, a process that should help Hearts get better and better.
And that's something else that you can sell further down the line as well. You say, well, this guy came here and then got a move to there, and then this guy came here and got a move to there. And just to add to what you've said about Khartoum and McCart, I can totally understand people looking at them and asking questions. But yeah, it sounds like there's largely two different categories of signing. One of those is prospects or players going into their peak, basically players that you can flip. Players that you can bring in and keep them for however long time, develop, or just give them a platform and flip. And then there's going to be others like Khartoum and McCart who are more in their prime, and you're buying them to see out the contracts. Basically, you're wanting them to be kind of regulars that hang around, not somebody who you're. Khartoum's clearly not somebody who's coming in for the fee that they're then going to try and double in a year or two or anything like that. That's not what's going on there. That's somebody that you're bringing in to like I say, to see out the contract. And while I would again question maybe the length of contract for McCart, I do not, especially with the way he's hit the ground running. I mean, we haven't really spoken about him much, but he's been very assured and very impressive, and he's improved Hearts. He's instantly improved Hearts. So. More of that, please.
yeah, absolutely. And because that's the other thing is like McCart is, for example, that they will have in terms of the process that's followed is that Hearts will or Critchley will go right. I need a left-sided with a view that Rolls are moving on. Need a left-sided centre back. So then the recruitment team will build a profile of a player, and that going from the info that Neil Critchley, the profile of player that Critchley wants, they'll build that with data. They'll feed it to Jamestown. They'll feed in any players that come from external sources, and then Jamestown will come up with options, some of who, like McCart, that the club are already aware of, and then others that maybe they're not aware of. And then it's a case of, from there, the Hearts have got a determined shortlist, and then it's about the club working through them and deciding who is the best fit, who's most affordable. It's a process that I believe it makes recruitment all the more simplified, and it allows those making decisions to be more assured. It's coming from Jamestown, who have such a standing within the football recruitment and data as well. So yeah, it just makes everything a bit more assured, a bit more solidified, and allows potentially Hearts to move quicker on players.
Yeah, the recruitment process is largely the same. I mean, the recruitment process is still, the old recruitment process is still there within what Hearts are doing now. It's just there's this extra component which helps filter through players quicker, basically. And there is a leap of faith there, and there people refer to as the black box. And Andrew McKinley said there's no actual, like Andrew McKinley said, there's no actual black box. But what people refer to is like their algorithm, the data that they've fed into that over years and years of analysing football matches and all that kind of thing. But the same recruitment stuff still goes on. Like you say, the coach says, I need this. And after the data process, there's still all the bits that you would do before, where you would do the eye test, and you meet the player and you get the vibes and what they're looking for and what their ambitions. And sometimes these kind of things can turn players off as well. So it's not, I think sometimes the impression's given that it's just purely analytical and it's all hard, cold data, but it's more like just something that's been supplanted into the recruitment process, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly that. And it's it's one of those where it takes you, as McKinley said, it's part of the process. It's not the whole process, but it is a really important part of the process. Is probably the best way to.
Well, it's taking the process to the next level, and that's the aim anyway.
And the fact that it's bespoke and kind of going off overall ground here in some aspects, but the fact is that it's Hearts have got exclusive use in Scotland, and it's bespoke to Hearts, as in the data and the information is tailored to a player who they think is going to be successful for Hearts in Scottish football. So it kind of takes that into account. Just finishing up, Jim McDowell asked, do you think the Jamestown thing might make us more appealing to players? To an extent, I think so. I think what will make Hearts more appealing to players is playing in Europe constantly, being successful, and that last bit I think is maybe more is something is that players will look at Oyegoke going to Italy, potentially Raul's going to MLS, and then seeing as like, okay, this guy's got to move to Italy. That could be me. That could be me, and they'll look at the club, and if it's going in the right direction, that's what makes it really, really appealing. But yes, it won't. It certainly won't hurt. That's for sure.
And as I said before, as well, it will be something that feeds back into it as well. That'll be both a byproduct of the success, and then further down the line, something that you can then use to entice players back, saying that we've got a track record of, if all goes well, we've got a track record of getting players into the English Premier League or top 5 leagues. That they should have just said that for shorthand.
But yeah, as Big Nose Glow Sniffing YouTube Disciple says, don't underestimate Hearts employees and transfers. Like I said, the Jamestown only take you so far. It's then up to people.
I'm laughing at the picture, by the way, not the comment. Sorry, what was it?
I just saying, reiterating, Jamestown takes Hearts some of the way, and then it's up to the Hearts themselves to get deals over the line and then filter through and decide who's the best. Jay the Jambo asked, joined a bit late. Have we put any bids in for wingers? Still think we need 2 more, one on each side, and that kind of ties in with where is it? It's a wee bit up here, which I've seen before we go off. This is why I should star comments, because it makes it easier. Or James Govan, he says, do you guys expect some more signings before end of the window? And do you think it could be wingers as first choice or another?
I asked you that exact same question earlier, because we expect there, if as it stands, 1 more we're expecting, but we don't know whether that's a winger or a centre back. But it's more likely to be a winger. Is there anything I've said that's off there?
I think it is. It's one of those where the
and then
squad,
it's dependent on players leaving. Your
squad is still, before Oyegoke leaving, the squad's still sitting at 29 first-team players.
Yes.
Too many. And that's what McKinley mentioned it, Critchley mentioned it, and coming into the window, that it's too many. So I do think that it won't be, I can't imagine it being, again, things can change, players can come available, etc., etc. So this is not definitive, but I can't imagine it being too busy in terms of ins. That busyness could be determined by players going out of the club. At this current moment, at this moment in time, like I said, things can change. I would imagine 1 at most. Whether it's a winger, I think ideally they would love to bring a winger in. Centre back, I think, will be more dependent on how serious Calcutt's issue is, but I don't think it is a massive as serious, because when you think about it, if, for example, if Kent and Kingsley both come back this this season, then if you added another centre back to it, you would have Nielsen, Steinvender, Halkett, McCart, Kingsley, Kent, and potentially another centre back. So yeah, it's an interesting one, and at the moment 1, and then kind of depending on potential exits is the best way to put it.
Loans, not really. I mean, what you're describing there, it wouldn't be out of the question, I suppose, at Hearts would like get defensive cover via loan or whatever. But it's just interesting. Yeah. They've not really gone near loans, have they? It's I know that like loan to buy, but loan to buys are a little bit different. Obligation or not to buy, I think they're still a bit different, because that's sort of saying we want a transfer here. There's definitely, I don't know, unless it goes wrong, you know what I mean? The teams usually follow through on that transfer. So, but there doesn't seem to be, which I suppose is encouraging, because it's not like they've just It's not like they've gone into January in a relegation battle and just gone straight for sort of desperate loans or sticking plasters. There seems to be long-term thinking with the signings, even the ones that have come in right at the start of the window.
And I think that's that's one of the things, is that I don't think they want to do too much in January unless the right people become available. It's easier to do more and what they want to do in the summer window, where it's you've got guys who are going out of contract. Someone asked about Shankland. As things stand, I would imagine that again, things can change, but Shankland's will leave. I think Grant will leave. Mackay will leave. And then Gordon's still up in there, just because I think that'll be something that'll be decided by him and the club later on in the season. So the summer is probably when you'll see a bigger transition of players. Right, we will leave it there. We have talked long enough. Thank you very much for everyone for joining. Thanks very much for commenting and continue to subscribe and support. If you are a subscriber, you may have bought a ticket to the Hearts Standard Q&A with Neil Critchley next Thursday. Craig and I will be kind of speaking to him and hopefully get loads more depth on kind of plans, style, etc., etc. There'll be a Q&A section as well for those attending. For those also, I'll be looking for questions as well. I'll be putting out a message asking for questions that people might want us to put to them. And then if you're not able to make it, I'm sure we will get all the kind of answers on the website in the days afterwards. But until later on in the week, whenever that might be, Thursday or Friday, have a good week, and we'll be back soon. Bye-bye.